I knew my 22-year career at MedTech Dynamics was over the second Jessica Caldwell walked through our Chicago headquarters wearing a designer suit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage. She had this look, like she'd graduated straight from business school into a corner office, never getting her hands dirty with actual work. I'm Richard Morrison, 49 years old, and I've been building medical devices since before this woman knew what a cardiac monitor was. I don't give TED Talks or post motivational quotes on LinkedIn. I'm the guy in the back lab with the oscilloscope and soldering iron, writing the firmware that keeps people's hearts beating. I invented the cardio watch system that made MedTech what it is today. Not a team effort, despite what the company website claims now. 12 years of my life, nights and weekends, debugging code and getting FDA approvals. It's a cardiac monitoring device that can predict arrhythmias 6 hours before they happen with 97.3% accuracy. It saved thousands of lives, and legally, it was mine. See, before I ever signed that employment contract back in 2011, I did something that makes corporate lawyers break out in cold sweats. I kept the core patents. MedTech didn't own the cardio watch engine, they licensed it. Think of renting a Ferrari engine for your Honda. They could use it, modify the housing, sell it worldwide. But if they stopped paying licensing fees or violated our agreement, I could pull that engine right out. Jessica didn't know this. Or maybe she figured a 49-year-old engineer wouldn't fight back. She was the new CEO, brought in by Hartwell Capital to optimize operations, corporate speak for/costs, and flip the company for maximum profit. She swept into R&D that first Monday, smelling like expensive perfume and aggressive ambition. "Richard, right?" she asked, not looking at me while I was calibrating a prototype. She was staring at her reflection in my monitor. "I love what you guys are doing here. Very granular work. But we need to think bigger picture. Stop thinking medical device. Start thinking lifestyle integration." "It detects heart attacks, Jessica," I said, keeping my voice level. "Not step counts." She laughed, this sharp fake sound. "That's the engineer mindset talking. I need you to think like a business owner. We're positioning for a liquidity event. Hartwell Medical has $350 million on the table, but they want clean IP ownership. Complexity scares investors, Richard. Complexity saves lives," I shot back. She stopped smiling and looked at me like I was a stubborn child. "We'll work on your adaptability. The old ways don't scale, Rick. Trust the process." The process, it turned out, meant erasing me slowly. First, my name disappeared from the engineering reports. The weekly R&D meetings I'd been running for 8 years got moved to times when I had manufacturing floor inspections. I'd walk past the conference room and see Jessica in there with the marketing kids, pointing at a whiteboard, with my algorithms drawn in the wrong colors explaining my 12 years of work to people who thought firmware was a type of clothing. I wasn't worried yet. You don't fire the guy who holds the patents, right? That's what I told myself while reviewing the latest FDA submission requirements in my office overlooking the Chicago River. The atmosphere was changing, though, getting heavy like the air before a thunderstorm. The junior staff stopped making eye contact. The shared calendar suddenly had blocks labeled strategic planning, leadership only. That took up half the day. Then I found the email. I was in the break room getting coffee when I saw a printed message on the counter, face up next to the creamer. From Jessica to the board, legacy personnel creating friction for Hartwell acquisition, need to streamline workforce demographics, handling the Morrison situation, expect resolution by Q2. The Morrison situation. That was me. I wasn't the chief engineer anymore. I was a problem to be solved. I picked up that paper and read it twice. My hands didn't shake. See, that's the thing about engineers. We don't panic, we analyze. I folded the email into a neat square and put it in my pocket. If Jessica wanted to play games, she should have checked the rulebook first. I went back to my desk and opened the secure folder on my personal laptop, not the company one. Inside was patent license agreement, final executed.pdf. I stared at section 12, the nuclear option I'd built in 12 years ago. "Try me, Jessica," I whispered to the empty lab. "Just try me. If you've never worked in corporate America, let me explain the soft purge. They don't change your keycard access, that's too obvious. Instead, they bleed your authority with 1,000 tiny cuts until you're a ghost in your own building. It started with the system access. One morning I tried logging into the CardioWatch development servers and got an access denied error. When I called Steven Torres, our IT director who I'd worked with for 6 years, he took 4 hours to respond. "Hey Rick, Jessica restructured the system permissions, said we needed better security protocols. You're on the general engineering network now." the general network. That's where the interns accessed basic documentation and filed expense reports. I'd been demoted from mission control to the parking garage. I walked into the office that day and the silence was deafening. You know that feeling when you enter a room and everyone stops talking? It was that, but constant. My team, people I'd trained, people whose kids' graduation parties I'd attended, would suddenly become very interested in their computer screens when I passed by. Then came the Paul incident. Paul was Jessica's nephew, 26 years old, wore expensive sneakers to the office, and had an MBA but couldn't tell a capacitor from a resistor. Jessica gave him the title Innovation Coordinator, or some meaningless corporate nonsense. I was in the lab testing a new sensor array when Paul bounced in, oblivious to the fact that I was clearly busy. "Hey, Richard, quick question," he chirped. "I'm cleaning up the IP documentation for the Hartwell due diligence team. Jessica said to make sure all the patent attributions are consistent. I saw your name on some of the legacy docs, but I can just do a find and replace with MedTech Dynamics proprietary technology, right? Keep everything uniform." My blood went cold. Paul pulled up his tablet. "Yeah, see, Jessica left a note here. Assert full corporate ownership. Remove individual inventor claims." I looked at the screen. It was a diagram of my CardioWatch algorithm, the specific signal processing loop that made the whole system work. And right there in bold Arial font, property of MedTech Dynamics, wholly owned technology. She wasn't just writing me out of the company history, she was committing fraud. Under our licensing agreement, MedTech had usage rights, not ownership. Claiming ownership to a buyer like Hartwell wasn't just a lie, it was a material breach that voided our entire contract. "Interesting," I said. "Paul, could you email me that presentation? I want to double-check the technical specifications." "Sure thing," he said, typing away. "You're awesome, Rick." Poor Paul. He had no idea he'd just handed me the ammunition to destroy his aunt's career. I went back to my office and waited for the email. There it was. Hartwell Acquisition. Presentation V3, final.pptx. I didn't scream or storm into Jessica's office. I opened my personal email and forwarded the file to Linda Walsh, my attorney, a woman who makes IRS auditors look friendly. My message was 3 words: document this breach. Linda replied in 2 minutes. Received. Section 7 violation confirmed. Nuclear option? I stared at the cursor blinking on my screen. Not yet. If I pulled the licensing agreement now, the deal would collapse and Jessica would spin it as a disgruntled old employee sabotaging the company. I needed her to commit completely. I needed her to stand in front of the world and lie so boldly there was no walking it back. I typed, "Wait, let her dig deeper." The next few days were surreal. I sat in meetings where they discussed the future of CardioWatch without asking the man who invented it. I watched Jessica strut around the office, high on the fumes of a $350 million deal. She bought a new espresso machine for the executive floor and started talking about celebrating our success stories. Every celebration was another nail in her coffin. She called me into her office late on a Thursday. The Chicago skyline was dark outside her floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across her imported desk. "Richard," she said, not offering me a seat, "we need to discuss your transition." "Transition?" I asked, playing dumb. "The Hartwell deal closes next week," she said, leaning back in her leather chair. "They want a fresh, organizational structure. Your salary is substantial for someone at your career stage. We need you to sign a separation agreement, clean exit, 6-month severance, and you release any residual IP claims. Just paperwork cleanup. And if I don't," she smiled that corporate shark smile, "then we terminate for cause. Failure to adapt to new processes. Insubordination. We'll bury you in legal costs until you're selling that old patent for scrap metal." She was threatening to fire me. The patent holder. It was so stupid I almost laughed. "I'll consider it," I said. "You have until the all-hands meeting tomorrow," she said. "Don't make this ugly, Richard." "Wouldn't dream of it," I replied. I didn't go home. I went to the server room where I'd spent countless nights over the years, listening to the steady hum of the cooling fans. I sat there for hours, watching the status lights blink green. Tomorrow, those lights were going red. The main conference room at MedTech was called the Hub, a glass-walled fishbowl in the center of our open office. If you were getting fired in the Hub, everyone saw it. If you were crying in the Hub, the whole company watched. Today, every employee was crammed in there for Jessica's strategic alignment presentation. She stood at the head of the table, flanked by board members who'd flown in from New York for the pre-acquisition celebration. They looked like a row of vultures in expensive suits. Jessica was practically vibrating with energy. She had the look of someone about to become very rich. I stood in the back, leaning against the wall. I wore my usual work clothes, khakis, button-down shirt, steel-toed boots. Not dressed for a funeral, but definitely ready for demolition. "Team," Jessica started, her voice carrying without a microphone. "We stand at the threshold of transformation. Hartwell Medical has recognized what I've been telling you for months. MedTech isn't just a company, it's a paradigm shift." A few people clapped, mostly from marketing. My engineers stared at their shoes. They knew the technology was solid, but they also knew the paradigm shift was mostly PowerPoint presentations built on top of my work. To get here, Jessica continued, pacing the room, we had to make difficult decisions. We had to optimize our human capital. We had to evolve from a research-heavy culture to a growth-focused organization. She stopped pacing and turned slowly until she was facing me directly. The room went silent. "Richard," she said, using just my first name like a disappointed parent. "You've been with us since the Cardio Watch inception. You wrote the original code, and we appreciate that contribution." She paused for dramatic effect. This was it, the performance. "But," she said, dropping her voice, "what got us here won't get us where we're going. We need visionaries, not just technicians. We need people who understand that a patent is worthless if it doesn't generate shareholder value. You've been resistant to change. You've clung to outdated methodologies. You think like a lab engineer, not a business leader." My face burned, but I kept my expression neutral. Let her talk, I thought. Let her put it all on record. "I offered you a generous transition package," Jessica said, lying through her teeth in front of 50 people. "You refused. You've threatened to hold the company hostage over technicalities." Murmurs rippled through the room. She was painting me as the villain, the stubborn old guard standing in the way of everyone's payday. "So," she said, straightening her jacket, effective immediately, "Richard Morrison's employment is terminated. For cause. Security will escort you out." 2 security guards were already waiting by the door. It was choreographed. She wanted this visual, the old engineer being physically removed to make way for progress. I looked at the board members. They watched with cold indifference. They didn't care who built the engine as long as the car sold. I looked at my team. Paul looked like he might throw up. Stephen gave me the tiniest nod. I pushed off the wall and walked toward the door. I didn't scream or launch into a speech about how I'd built the company's future. Instead, I stopped and turned back. "You're making a mistake, Jessica," I said quietly. In that silent room, my voice carried like a gunshot. "The only mistake," she sneered, "was keeping you this long. Your patents belong to MedTech, Richard. Read your contract. Now get out. Read your contract." The irony was so thick you could cut it with a scalpel. I picked up my laptop bag and walked past the table of board members. I walked past Jessica, who was already turning back to the room, dismissing me like yesterday's newspaper. I felt every eye in that building watching me leave. The security guard reached for my arm. I stepped aside. "I know the way," I said. As the elevator doors closed, I could see Jessica raising a champagne glass through the hub's glass walls. She thought the game was over. She thought she'd won. I pulled out my phone as the elevator descended and opened my secure text thread with Linda. "It's done," I typed. "Public termination for cause." She explicitly claimed patent ownership in front of the board and Hartwell representatives. Linda replied instantly, "Execute the revocation. 24-hour countdown starts now." I walked out of the building into the bitter Chicago wind. The air smelled like snow and car exhaust. It smelled like freedom. There's a specific kind of silence that follows detonation, the quiet moment before the debris starts falling. That was my next 24 hours. I went home to my Lincoln Park apartment, clean space, practical furniture with my personal workshop in the spare bedroom. I didn't turn on the news or check LinkedIn for Jessica's inevitable PR spin about organizational optimization. Instead, I made coffee and sat by my window watching the lake. At exactly 3:17 p.m., Linda had sent the email that was currently sitting in MedTech's legal department inbox. Subject: Notice of Patent License Termination. Immediate action required to General Counsel, MedTech Dynamics, CC, Board of Directors. Per Section 12 of the Master Patent License Agreement dated March 15, 2011, licensor Richard Morrison hereby exercises the right to terminate all usage rights to patents US 8 to 942,156 and US 9 103,847 Cardio Watch system due to material breach of contract. 1. false claims of ownership to third parties. 2. Termination of inventor without cause in violation of founder protection provisions. This termination becomes effective 24 hours from receipt at 3:17 p.m. tomorrow. MedTech Dynamics must cease all operations utilizing licensed technology or face immediate litigation for patent infringement. It was a kill switch, a legal EMP. Jessica wouldn't see it immediately. She was too busy celebrating. The general counsel, Charles Rodriguez, would flag it as urgent but wouldn't interrupt the party. They'd assume it was a bluff from a bitter ex-employee. Around 6 p.m. my phone buzzed. Text from Stephen. Weird energy here. Charles just ran into Jessica's office looking like he saw a ghost. Jessica's yelling, "You good?" "I'm fine, Stephen," I replied. "Just doing some late-night reading. Keep your head down." By 8 p.m., the first call came. Not Jessica. She was too proud. Charles, the general counsel. "Richard." His voice was tight, strained. "We received a concerning document from your attorney." "Hello, Charles." "You mean the termination notice?" "Look, let's not be hasty. Jessica was under pressure today. The termination, we can reclassify it as a layoff. We can increase the severance package. Pulling the patents, that's nuclear. You'd be destroying the company's value." "The company has no value without my IP, Charles. Jessica made that clear when she said my patents belong to MedTech. I'm just correcting the record." "Richard, be reasonable. Hartwell is signing Monday. If this cloud hangs over the IP, they'll walk away." "That sounds like a Jessica problem, not a Richard problem," I said. "You have 19 hours left." I hung up and blocked his number. Then I saw Jessica's name on my screen. I let it ring once, twice, then sent it to voicemail. She called 15 times in 30 minutes. I could picture her in that corner office, designer jacket wrinkled, staring at her phone like it might explain how a 49-year-old engineer had just destroyed her career. I ordered Chinese food, watched the History Channel, and slept better than I had in months. The next morning at 7 a.m., 8 hours until deadline, my phone was a graveyard of missed calls and frantic texts. "Richard, pick up the phone. We need to talk. You're being childish. I'll sue you for tortious interference. Please, let's work this out." The desperation was delicious. But I wasn't waiting for Jessica. I was waiting for the other shoe to drop. Linda had sent a courtesy copy of the termination notice to Hartwell's legal team as part of standard due diligence disclosure. At 10:30 a.m., my phone rang. Unknown number, New York area code. Richard Morrison speaking. "Mr. Morrison," a cool, unfamiliar voice. "This is Michael Torres, lead counsel for Hartwell Medical. We received a document regarding the IP status of the CardioWatch technology. Do you have a moment?" I smiled. "For you, Michael. I have all day." Michael Torres sounded exactly like someone who bills $1,500 an hour. His voice was smooth, emotionless, and sharp as a surgical scalpel. "Let me understand the timeline," Torres said. I could hear papers shuffling. "You hold the primary utility patents for the cardiac monitoring algorithm. You licensed it to MedTech 12 years ago. Yesterday, the CEO terminated your employment and asserted full ownership of said patents in a recorded meeting." "That's correct," I said. "She also violated the non-disparagement clause and founder protection provisions." "I see." Long pause. "And the license termination takes effect in 5 hours. 4 hours and 47 minutes, I checked my watch. "Mr. Morrison," Torres said, his tone shifting to something like respect, "Hartwell is prepared to deploy $350 million based on the premise that MedTech owns or has perpetual licensing rights to this technology. If that license is terminated, we're essentially buying very expensive office furniture." "I'm aware," I said. "I built the technology, Michael. Without my algorithms, their device is just a fancy heart rate monitor. Why wasn't this disclosed in the data room?" "Because Jessica Caldwell believed that if she ignored a contract hard enough, it would disappear," I said. "She bet that a 49-year-old engineer wouldn't fight back. She forgot that I've been writing airtight contracts since before she graduated college." "Understood," Torres said. "Thank you for your candor. I need to make some calls." He hung up. I poured another cup of coffee. The wait was almost over. Meanwhile, back at MedTech, the situation had apparently devolved into complete chaos. Stephen was sending me updates from the server room, Jessica screaming at Charles, literal screaming. They're searching for contract loopholes. Found nothing. Board members arriving. Jessica blaming you. Says you're unstable. Hartwell team just walked in. They look pissed. I could picture it perfectly. The Hartwell team marching into the hub with briefcases and dead eyes. Jessica trying to flash that $1 million smile while sweat soaked through her designer blouse. My phone rang again. Jessica, I answered this time. I wanted to hear it. Richard, she sounded breathless. Thank God. Look, I've been talking to the board. We can fix this. It's over, Jessica. It's not over. You're going to destroy everything. Do you have any idea how much money is on the table? Your equity, everyone's equity, my equity in a company that stole my work? I don't care. I didn't steal anything. I was positioning it for maximum value. It's business, Richard. You don't understand modern corporate strategy, and you don't understand patent law, I said calmly. You fired the patent holder, Jessica. You claimed ownership of my brain. The termination is automatic. I'll reinstate you, she shouted. Right now, Chief. Technology officer. Whatever title you want, just call Torres and tell him the license is valid. I don't want to work for you, Jessica. I never want to see your face again. You vindictive. I hung up. 3:17 p.m. Time's up. I opened my laptop and accessed the Cardio Watch licensing server. I still had my admin credentials. Stephen hadn't revoked them yet. Good man. Status? Active. License holder, MedTech. Dynamics? Expiry, indefinite. I opened another window and entered the termination command Linda had prepared. Legal reality was already shifting. Now I just had to update the technical reality. 3:17 p.m. Exactly. I hit enter. Status, terminated. License holder, none. Expiry, immediate. I leaned back in my chair. The phone didn't ring. The world didn't end. But 15 miles away in a boardroom that smelled like fear and stale bagels, the ground had just opened up. I wasn't in the room when it happened, but thanks to the deposition transcripts from the shareholder lawsuit, I can tell you exactly how it went down. 3:45 p.m. The entire board was seated. Jessica sat at the head, trying to project confidence while her eyes darted around like a trapped animal. The Hartwell team sat across from them like a firing squad. Michael Torres stood up. He didn't open a folder or pull up slides. He just held one piece of paper. Ladies and gentlemen, Torres said, we are suspending the acquisition process effective immediately. The room erupted. Suspending? Roger Goldman from the board sputtered. We're at the signing stage. The funds are frozen, Torres said. We have confirmed that the primary patent holder has terminated MedTech's licensing agreement due to material breach. Jessica slammed her hand on the table. He's bluffing. It's a negotiation tactic. Torres looked at her with the clinical detachment of a coroner. Ms. Caldwell, we've reviewed the original license agreement, specifically Section 12. It clearly states that termination of the inventor without cause voids the license with 24-hour notice. He slid the paper across the table. Linda's termination notice. Notice was served 24 hours ago. As of 3:17 p.m. today, MedTech Dynamics is operating unlicensed medical technology. Every device you sell is patent infringement. You're selling stolen property. The board turned to stare at Jessica. The temperature dropped 20 degrees. Jessica, Roger's voice was deadly quiet. Did you fire the patent holder? I optimized the organization, she stammered. He was difficult, resistant to change. I didn't think he would actually— You didn't think! Roger cut her off. You told us the IP was secure. You said the founder was aligned with the transition. He's just one engineer, Jessica yelled, losing all composure. We have the whole team. We have the code. You have the code, Torres corrected, but not the legal right to use it. And according to our technical review, the system requires cryptographic authentication from Mr. Morrison's private keys for any updates or modifications. That was my ace in the hole, a little detail I'd never mentioned to Jessica. The system wasn't just legally protected, it was technically tethered to me. So, Torres continued, buttoning his jacket, unless you can get Mr. Morrison back in this room to apologize and reinstate the license, this company is worth less than zero. You're looking at lawsuits from patients, investors, and us. Jessica looked at her phone, at the board, at the door. I can fix this, she whispered. You can't fix anything, Roger said, standing up. You're done, Jessica. The board is convening an emergency session. You are relieved of all duties pending investigation into gross negligence and breach of fiduciary duty. Jessica stood there, mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. The golden girl with the MBA and corner office had flown too close to the sun, and the sun was holding a patent termination order. By 5 p.m., the emails started arriving. Not from Jessica. She was probably at a bar somewhere, explaining to anyone who'd listen how she was the victim of age discrimination. Subject: Urgent reconciliation discussion. MedTech board. Richard, hope you are well. There has been a serious misunderstanding regarding your departure. Jessica Caldwell has been removed from her position. We would like to open dialogue about reinstating your role and the licensing agreement. We are prepared to offer a substantial retention package, including increased equity and board representation. I read it and actually laughed out loud. Misunderstanding. That's rich. I didn't reply immediately. I let them stew in their own panic for a while. Around 7 p.m., Linda called. They're in full panic mode, she said, sounding delighted. Roger just called me, offered you CEO position and a $5 million signing bonus if you reactivate the license by Monday. What did you tell him? I told him you were considering your options and had concerns about the company culture, she said. Richard, you have them completely over a barrel. What do you actually want? I looked out my window at the Chicago skyline. I had enough money. My patents had always paid well. This wasn't about cash. I want the IP back, Linda. All of it. No licensing. Full ownership transfer. I want MedTech to dissolve the medical device division and transfer all CardioWatch assets to my holding company. They can keep the office space and coffee machines. They'll never agree to that. That bankrupts the company. They're already bankrupt, Linda. They just don't know it yet. Without the licensing agreement, they have no product. I'm just offering to haul away the wreckage. The standoff lasted 3 days. MedTech's private valuation tanked as word leaked. My engineering team started resigning in droves. Steven sent me a selfie holding a box of his belongings with the caption "Band playing as ship sinks." Finally, on Wednesday, the board caved. They had no choice. Hartwell had officially withdrawn their offer. The company was bleeding money with no revenue stream. I agreed to meet, not at the office, but at a coffee shop downtown. Neutral ground. Roger showed up looking 10 years older than he had on Monday. He didn't order anything. You win, he said, sliding a folder across the small table. Complete asset transfer agreement. We release all claims to CardioWatch technology. You drop the patent infringement suit. We go our separate ways. I opened the folder. It was all there. My code, my data, my 12 years of work coming home. And Jessica? I asked. Jessica is facing a shareholder lawsuit for breach of fiduciary duty, Roger said grimly. She'll never be a CEO again. I signed the papers. Pleasure doing business with you, Roger. Here's the thing they never understood. Even if Jessica hadn't fired me, she still would have failed. 2 weeks before the Paul incident, I'd filed a continuation patent for CardioWatch 2.0. Medical monitoring systems drift over time. Accuracy drops from 97.3% to around 89% without updates. I developed a self-healing algorithm that solved this permanently, owned 100% by my holding company. Jessica thought she was selling a perpetual motion machine. She was actually selling a wind-up toy, and I held the only key. A week later, I went back to MedTech to collect some personal items. The office was a ghost town. Jessica's motivational posters were gone. Her fancy espresso machine sat unplugged. I found Jessica in the hub, packing boxes under security supervision. She looked terrible. Wrinkled clothes, hollow eyes, that confident gleam replaced by shock. When she saw me through the glass, I could see her mouth something. Maybe I'm sorry. Maybe something else. I didn't wave or gloat. I just turned and walked away. Outside, the Chicago wind was sharp. I pulled out my phone and saw a text from Steven. New servers ready, team assembled, say the word. I typed back, let's build something that lasts. I got in my car and started the engine. They'd tried to steal my life's work. They forgot that some fires burn anyone foolish enough to grab them without proper protection. The patents were safe. The team was intact. And me? I was just getting started. Thanks for listening to this mess. If you enjoyed watching corporate arrogance get a reality check, remember this. Read your contracts. Every word matters. Real power doesn't announce itself with fancy titles. It just acts with precision when the moment comes. Some lessons cost $350 million to learn.